I want to talk a little bit about fundraising. From my understanding and what I've read in our conversations, you were efficient. You really thought about efficiency in times that it didn't matter. We go through cycles, but you thought about efficiency and it was important. But you also did fundraise.
Right.
And you want to talk maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah. We both my co-founder and I came out of being consultants. So we ran a consulting company prior to that, and we almost had to teach ourselves how to run a product company. We were really focused on operational margins because that's what you do, operating margins because that's what you do as a services company. And it took us a while to figure out, okay, as a product company, you are going to invest. You're going to be in the red maybe for a little bit till you start getting revenues to compensate for what you invested. We got our first 20 customers completely bootstrapped. We got to about $2.5 million in ARR without taking a dime of outside capital. At which point, we saw our first competitor showing up in the market that was behind us. They hadn't yet really gotten a customer. We were starting to see what a successful sales motion looked like after getting these 20 customers. We knew we had product market fit for this version and really said, well, if we're able to raise a little bit of capital now, this is a good time to get maybe 3 or 4 salespeople. Again, not this big organization, 3 or 4 salespeople, and also add to our engineering team so we can accelerate R&D because we've heard from the market what they're looking for next in our product. And so we went out and raised a small $2.5 million round at that point. It was challenging, even though the metrics were really positive for us. As I just said, I had to knock on a lot of doors, had a lot of them slammed on me. I was told I was stupid. Our idea made no sense. It wasn't scalable. The TAM wasn't large enough. The usual things. And I don't blame any of those investors because I look back and say, you know, could I have said that if I were in their shoes? Probably. It could have, it's possible. Um, but we got lucky. We got one investor who said yes. They came in, and then things got progressively easier as success started showing up in our numbers and metrics. So when we went in to raise our Series B a couple of years down the line, we had 4 competing term sheets. So we were able to get a little bit of a bidding war and some really competitive terms for ourselves. And then when I raised the Series C for the company a year and a half after that, or 2 years after that, we had 9 competing term sheets at this point.
Wow.
So it was almost an exponential increase in the number of investors that were getting interested. And yeah, so I would say to any founders out there, don't give up. Like, yes, it is really hard to raise capital. You hear all these positive stories of people raising at ridiculous valuations and they're hitting tech crunch all the time. It's not the norm. It's a damn hard process.
Yeah, you hear it's like self-selection, the people, those stories, and it's about they raised, they raised in 3 days and they raised 50 million, at this, and it's like it's not the 99% of fundraising processes are not that, you know. How many investors you think you spoke to for the first round? How many investors before you found that one?
It was over 100 for the first one.
Wow.
Yeah, over 100. I was just so focused on that. I went out to Silicon Valley in Boston. I live in New York, so New York was easy for me. But I was out in the DC area, Boston, and the Valley for 3 months. I was out all the time in one of these places, just talking to investors, sort of begging them to put money into the company. And it finally worked. We got an investor out of the DC area. It was great. And we were able to use that capital quite efficiently because when we went out to raise our Series B, we had by then grown from being a 2.5 million ARR company to a 14 million ARR company. So it was a rapid jump. We went from 2.5 to 7 to 12 and a half, 4, and then a few months down the line, 14. So it was just over 2 years. So it was very quick. And that's why, now I had to speak to only about 10 investors and we got 4 term sheets. So it went from over 100 to get one. The yield increased substantially. And then the last round, honestly, it was unsolicited. We started getting term sheets coming in, and I'm like, this might be a good time to raise. I was going to wait 6 months, but when people are coming knocking at your door and you have the leverage, it might be a good time.
When you were getting the no's from people in the early round, did you pivot the story to fit what the investors basically kind of were asking for? Or did you keep the story and essentially that one investor is the one who believed the story?
I think it's really important. I would say to folks that one of the lessons I learned is I always demonstrated to potential investors and my existing investors and board that I am married to the problem at hand that we're trying to solve constantly. I'm not necessarily married to the solution as I think of it today, because that may have to evolve. The tech landscape may change. There'll be the competitive landscape will change. There could be a number of factors. We will get customer feedback. And I think that served me really well in the fundraising process, where that ounce of humility where you say, yes, I'm confident this is a problem with a large addressable market. I'm also confident that today we have a product that fits the bill, but we
Hmm.
can be quite flexible based on what we hear and what we observe to pivot or change direction as needed. We're not going to say, okay, hey, we're leaving phishing and we're going to start developing authentication software now. But,
Yeah, right.
the way we tackle the phishing problem might have to evolve. And honestly, we actually did. We followed suit and we did evolve. Through the life of PhishMe, we started off as a phishing simulation software. We had one product. By the time we sold to the private equity folks, we had four products, and actually the some of the newer products were already at four times the average sale price of the phishing simulator product. The growth rates were three times that of PhishMe, and so it was when we saw the opportunity, we said we just got to jump in. Of course, it was very
Hmm.
adjacent; the pieces fit together, but we had to change focus along the way.
Hmm. I want to actually keep going on this because on the product side,